Your words and actions and their effects fit a pattern consistent with your self-concept and your dominant goals. That means that you can be in a conversation and you'll have this impulse to say something. And you'll say it and it'll turn out to be exactly the right thing. When I'm doing seminars like this, very often I will pull, you see I go off subject or off topic a lot when we're talking. Almost invariably, the reason is because there's somebody in the audience who needs me to go off topic. So I'll give an example that may not be relevant to a lot of people, and people will come up to me in the hallways later and say, that changed my life. I'm glad you said that. I had no idea. And it was for that person. I'm getting a vibration, and I'll just give an example or a story or an experience, and I say, that was for me. That was just for me. Many of you may have had that experience already. I said something, and you said, that was aimed at me. That's aimed at my situation. And so that's why this seminar is what we call fluid within structure. The structure is what is written down, but all the rest of it is fluid and flowing and changing continuously. Sometimes you'll have an impulse to say something, and something will tell you, don't say anything. Don't say anything. And so you'll just sit silently, and it'll turn out later that it was very wise that you said nothing. Sometimes I've seen in a conversation where I wanted to say something to show how smart I was, and the other person is talking, and I'm just waiting, I want to say, and then I say, wait a minute. I never get a chance to say what I want to say because this person or other people keep talking. Maybe I'm not supposed to say anything. And so I stop, and I stop trying to say something, and later I realize I wasn't supposed to say that. If I had said it, it would have caused problems. So therefore, trust your intuition. If it tells you to speak, speak. If it tells you not to speak, don't speak. If it tells you to turn on this corner or to go into this store or to pick up this book. I've had people, I can tell you, Earl Nightingale used to be the greatest voice in American radio. He did more than 1,000 versions or segments of what was called Our Changing World. He was on 600 radio stations, and he made millions of dollars. Do you know what changed his life? Is he walked into a book when he got off. He was on the USS Arizona, the ship that sunk in Pearl Harbor. He was one of the few survivors. And he was working away at a Joe job in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. He went into a bookstore, and he couldn't buy a new book. He found a used book, an old beat-up copy of Think and Grow Rich. And he talks about this. He said he bought this copy of Think and Grow Rich and took it home. And it told about setting goals and doing what you really desire and trusting infinite intelligence. And he'd always wanted to be in radio. And he went down to a radio station and talked them into hiring him late night radio. He became one of the most well-known radio voices in history and an extraordinary success. He said it was because walking into that bookstore and finding that one tattered book in the bin and taking the book home. And he just said he had an impulse to pick up the book. He said the title, Think and Grow Rich, he said, he looked at it, he said, what a dumb title. And he was about to go on, and something just caused his hand to reach out and get the book, and it changed his life. It changed the life of many other people, too. So, if you have an impulse, something to do or say, be sure to do it. The superconscious mind explains remarkable events. First of all, it explains serendipity, which is what I just talked about in a way. It's the process of making happy discoveries. Remember, there were three princes of Serendip. It's a fairy tale who go around the countryside in days of old, and wherever they went, people would make happy discoveries. And for example, they would go went to this farm, and while they're at the farm, the major storm comes up, and the river rages, and the river washes away half of the farm. And the farmer is in despair, he said, and they're very, very cheerful. They said, well, let's not be in despair. You never know what good could come of this. And they go out on the farm, and the river has washed away the dust from a massive bank of jewels and precious stones that made the farmer one of the richest men in the kingdom. And if the flood had not come along and washed away half of the farm, they would have never found all those precious stones. You probably heard this story in Charlie Wilson's War. It's a very famous story where, and this comes from the Princes of Serendip. He tells about this old story. Is the horse, the farmer's horse gets away. The barn is open, and the horse runs away. This is in the olden days, many years ago. And the horse runs away, and they say, oh, what a shame, you have lost your horse. And the farmer says, well, it's too early to tell. There might be something good come of it. And 3 or 4 days later, the horse comes running back, and he's bringing back a whole herd of wild horses, beautiful horses. And they all come thundering back, and they manage to round them up and put them in the corral. And now the farmer has more horses than anyone else in the entire area. And the people say, boy, that's really fortunate. Got all those horses. He said, well, it's a little bit too early to tell. You never know. And then his son takes one of the horses and tries to break it. That wild horse, break it so it can be domesticated, and falls off and breaks his leg. And they said, oh, that's a terrible tragedy. Your son broke his leg. And he says, yes, but we don't know for sure yet whether it's good or bad. And then along comes the army recruiting. This is what they do. They would go through the villages and recruit every able-bodied man into the army and train them on the march to the big battle with the war that was on. And they couldn't take his son because his son had a broken leg. They said, oh, you're certainly fortunate your son had a broken leg. And yes, you never can tell. And the army went out and got into a major battle, and everyone was killed. Saved the son's life. But the whole thing was you never can tell. It might be good, it might be bad, it might be good. So this attitude, you get stuck, you go to a restaurant and the restaurant says we've lost your reservation, you can't get in. So you can get upset or say, well, maybe it's a good idea. Maybe we should go to a different restaurant. Maybe that other restaurant will be even better. So serendipity means you're always going to find happy things happening in your life. But here's the one key to the principle of serendipity is the only people who find happy things or make happy discoveries are people looking for something. They're looking for happiness, they're looking for success, they're looking for goals, they're looking for something, and as a result, they keep making happy discoveries. Many business people who've decided to start a business and don't have any money, somebody will loan them a book, and in the book will be a principle, and the principle will be what they needed. And later on, they're wealthy, and they live in big houses on the hill, and they trace it back to that one chapter in that one book that one friend gave them when they had started off their business and they were struggling. So be open to making happy discoveries, okay? Now, the second principle, and this is really interesting, many books have been written on this, and this is all science, it's called synchronicity. A synchronicity is the process or coincidence of events in which two or three things that are totally unrelated happen simultaneously together to help you achieve your goal. So let me give you an example here. Well, then something happens. You go to work and your boss says, you've really been working hard. Why don't you take a vacation? Take a week off. Well, you were just sort of thinking about that this morning, but you say, yeah, I'd like to, but I can't afford it. And then you get an IRS check back for $3,000 for your taxes. And then your wife says, I was just talking to Susan, she works over at that travel agency, and they have this special fam trip that you can go on, and you can get 7 days and 8 days and 7 nights in Maui, and it's only $1,235. Although it would normally be vastly more. And something else happens. Now, all of these events, you see, are separate in time and space. They only have one thing that binds them together. The one thing that binds them together is your goal. So this is called synchronicity, when a series of unrelated events occur that have only one meaning, and the meaning is the goal that you set. So be alert to synchronicity in your life. It's the most amazing damn thing, and everybody here has experienced it before, but sometimes you experience it and say, wasn't that amazing? What a coincidence. I was just talking about that this morning and somebody called this afternoon. And you say, wow, isn't that interesting? Well, this is what happens when the superconscious mind works. So in the logical world, things have a cause and effect relationship. In the superconscious world, you do this, you get that. In the superconscious mind, things have a synchronicity relationship. Is completely unrelated events happen, sometimes on the other side of the world, that cause you to be successful. Here's an example. Car sales are down for U.S. car makers. But suddenly, the biggest Japanese car makers can't get parts because of the tsunami and the nuclear reactor. And so what has happened? There's been an upsurge of sales in American cars. Have you noticed that? That would be worth hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. It may transfer people's loyalties from Japanese cars to American cars. It could save people's careers. I mean, the number of ripple effects from that, but you can be sure of one thing, is that everybody working in the American car industry was hoping and wishing and praying and dreaming for something that would happen to increase the sales of their cars. And then things happen on the other side of the world that are completely unpredictable and inexplicable. So watch for synchronicity, and the more you watch for it, the more it will happen. Events are organized on the basis of meaning, and the significance they have are defined by you and the goals that you have. It's the meaning of the events. Now, a monitor circuit means that you can actually pre-program your mind. And the way you do it, you remember that your subconscious mind and your superconscious can only respond to positive commands. I used to teach karate, and the karate school that I took over had been run by an ex-sergeant from the military, and he was always telling people, don't do this and don't do that and stop doing this and stop doing that. And what I learned before I took over the school is that the person cannot visualize a negative command. In other words, we can't visualize don't do something. If I say to you, don't trip, you cannot create a visualization of not tripping, but if I say pick up your feet, you can see clearly, pick up your feet. So always when you give instruction, you give positive instruction, do it this way, rather than that, do it this way. Well, a monitor circuit only accepts commands that are positive. So you don't say, I want to remember not to forget my keys. So what you do is you say, remember to take my keys with me when I leave. Remember to take that out of the refrigerator before I go. Remember to pick this up when I'm on my way home. Remember to do this. And when you say that, your superconscious mind takes it, and exactly at the moment you're walking past that table, it'll twig it into your arm, your mind, and you'll get the keys. It's the most amazing darn thing, and you've all had this experience. Well, there's two places where monitor circuits are used, and you can use it for anything. You can pre-program yourself to call somebody, to stop off, to pick something up, to do something, and so on. And the first place where people program their minds is, first of all, with parking spaces. There are people, Barbara is even better at it than I am, who always get parking spaces. Yesterday we went to a restaurant, and the restaurant was jammed. You know, everything was busy Friday night. The restaurant was absolutely jammed, and we drove around in the parking lot, and there was not a single, even illegal place that you could park. And Barbara said, well, go up to the front. There'll be one right by the front door. Well, I had just driven past the front door, and there weren't any parking spaces there, and men don't like women to give them instructions about driving. And so I drove all the way around and got all the way back to the front door, and someone had just left from the parking spot right into the front door. I just drove into the parking spot and literally walked 6 feet into the restaurant. It was empty. In other words, somebody had been holding the space for us and was waiting until we had come a full circle around and then backed up and drove away. Now, the other place that you can get parking, and by the way, I've taught this many times, the key is, do you believe that you can get a parking space? If you do, you will. The second place is waking up without an alarm clock. Is there anybody here who wakes up without an alarm clock? Yeah. What you do is you can make a decision to wake up at any time you want for the rest of your life, and you'll never wake up. You never need an alarm clock. Your body actually will start, and even I travel as many as 12 time zones in a day. I've spoken in Ekaterinburg, Russia. That's 12 time zones from San Diego, flowing all the way there via Frankfurt, via Moscow to Ekaterinburg, 12 hours time change. I can go to sleep and wake up exactly on the minute that I set my mind for in Ekaterinburg time. There are a lot of people who get colds and flus. Do you know why people get colds and flus? It's because they don't decide not to.